Hi everyone, good evening, and welcome to the second Scholar Saturday session hosted by the Strivers Network. For those of you joining through our YouTube channel, welcome, and whatever time you're joining us. So the Scholar Saturday sessions are an initiative by the Strivers Network to make the information that we have as publicly available as possible, and make sure that we assist as many potential scholars and strivers in on their journey as we can. And so without further ado, we can get started now. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Please, for those of you attending, please note that this workshop is currently being streamed live on our YouTube channel. And so obviously because it is being live streamed, if you unmute yourself and speak, you will be recorded. So if you would like to ask a question during this session, you can use the Q&A section or the comment, the chat input inbox. And if not, you can use the Scholars exclusive Q&A session period at the latter half to voice your questions verbally. Please note that the Q&A session will not be recorded. So. Lastly, if you're tuning in on YouTube and have any questions or just want to reach out to us, you can do so via email, thestriversnetwork@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us via our socials. We're available on all your social, wherever you use your social media, Instagram, Facebook, so on. So just a quick introduction about the Strivers Network. Basically, we are a very young youth-led organization. And basically we started in 2021 and we wanted to break the barriers in terms of college access when it comes to under-resourced students in Sri Lanka. And over the past 3 years, our 40 to 50 scholars have received over $4 million worth of scholarships and financial aid to universities, to top-ranked universities in the world, including Oxford, Princeton, MIT, Caltech, Cornell, and so on and so forth. And I will be your presenter for today. My name is Rivi Vijayasekara, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Strivers Network. So today we will be talking about the Common App, or the Common Application, which is the main application portal used by applicants to universities in the US. And we will also be doing like a full walkthrough of the requirements of US college admissions, as well as important terms and the timeline. Then we'll be doing a bit of a walkthrough of the actual Common Application itself. And then lastly, we'll be going over a couple other college applications, as well as some general tips. And after this recorded session, our scholars will get exclusive access to some tips that we have about the activities section and strategies that we will recommend them that they use when they go through their Common Application process. And so starting off with the timeline of US college admissions. So I understand that when you see these like bullet points, it's going to be a little bit confusing, but I'm going to break it down into two different timelines. When you're applying to the US for undergrad, for your undergrad, there will be two different timelines generally. There will be an early timeline, or the early round, and then there will be a regular round. So the early timeline, or the early round, will be between as in the applications themselves. The Common Application opens on the 1st of August each year. And so do all other applications generally, like in the month of August. And in the early round, the application deadline is usually between mid-October and mid-November. And you get your application result or application decision at the end of the year, so end of December. And so that's the early round. And then you have your regular round, for which the application deadline is early to mid-January. And you get your application decision usually in the month of March, or maybe in early April. And so within those two rounds, there are different admissions decisions that you can use options. So in the early round, there is, first of all, I'm going to go to the next slide here just to go over these terms real quick. So firstly, in the early round, you have what is known as early action, and this is the simplest option. Basically, it means that you just apply early and there are no conditions attached to applying to that school early. An example of a university that offers early action is MIT. And then secondly, you have restrictive early action, or REA. And the one condition behind REA is basically that it is restrictive, as the name suggests. You can only apply to that university as far as private universities go. So an example of a university that has REA is Harvard University. And basically, if you choose to apply Harvard University in the early round, you cannot apply to any other private university in the early round as well. You can, though, apply to other public universities, but you can't apply to any private universities. Keep in mind that these conditions only apply to the early round. Of course, like after the early round is done, you can apply to as many colleges as you want in the regular round, depending on your decision. And that's a good segue to talk about early decision and early decision 2. And basically, early decision is a binding option in the early round. Basically, it means that if you apply to a school, let's say, for example, Cornell University offers early decision. If you apply to Cornell University early decision and you get in, you absolutely have to attend Cornell University, no questions asked. The only exception that we've seen being used to be able to withdraw from an early decision offer is if, for example, the university hasn't given the student enough financial aid, and even after a multiple appeals of financial aid, the university simply can't provide that student with the financial aid that they need in order for university to be affordable. But in general, for all intents and purposes, early decision is a binding choice, and it usually is reserved for your number one choice. And early decision 2 is essentially the same thing as early decision. The same rules and conditions apply, but it is in a different timeline. It is kind of in the regular timeline. So the early decision option is in the early round, which, as I mentioned, the deadline is in mid to end of October, and the decision is it comes end of December. But for early decision 2, you have the same deadline as the regular decision deadline, so the regular round deadline, but your application decision comes around the month of February, so a little bit earlier than the regular decision result, but still in that regular timeline generally. So yeah, then you have regular decision, which is what you use for all your other applications. Generally, like you students apply to 1 to 5 universities in their early round, and the rest of their applications go in the regular round if they haven't gotten into an early choice. And lastly, we have rolling admissions. We have seen some colleges use this option, which basically means that there is no strict deadline, and they start reviewing applications as soon as they come, and they treat it first come, first serve. And generally, they get back to students with an admissions decision, in a certain period of time, maybe a few weeks, maybe a month or so. But generally, there is no strict deadline. So going back to the timeline, so yeah, I've already covered like deadlines and decisions. And lastly, College Decision Day is a well-celebrated day in America, and it's always the 1st of May every year. And basically, it's the deadline for students to essentially confirm their university choice or matriculate. So that's the 1st of May. So as you can see, the general US college admissions timeline runs from August when applications open to May when you have to make your decision. So that's the gist of it. And then when it comes to requirements for US college admissions, There are things that the student has to prepare, there are things that the school has to prepare, and then there are things that the student's recommenders have prepare, usually their subject teachers or maybe other recommenders such as coaches and directors. Um, so focusing on what the student has to prepare. We are going to be going through the common application anyway, so that covers like your personal information, your education, which includes like the subjects that you did at school, any awards and honors that you received, and then lastly your extracurricular activities. And we'll be delving into that as well. And then the Common App essay is essentially the centerpiece of your application. It is a 650-word personal statement that a student and the student uses that space basically to kind of make their main case for themselves in their application. Usually, and we'll be talking a bit more about this at a later Scholar Saturday session. But yeah, generally the Common App essay tends to be the most tends to be regarded as the most important aspect of the US college application process. Then alongside your Common App essay, you sometimes may get asked some supplementary essay prompts from universities, and these are university specific. I'll be explaining which components are common to all universities or part of the Common App, and which components are university specific when we go through the actual portal. But yeah, generally supplementary essays may ask you some questions about your extracurricular activities, maybe some community that you got involved in, maybe a challenge that you overcame, things like that. And then you will need to submit your SAT scores. But actually, you will need to submit your SAT scores if the university requires them, which after the pandemic, universities are slowly starting to require them bit by bit. Just a few examples of universities that have gone back to requiring SATs. Yale University, Harvard University, Brown University. I believe Stanford will be requiring SATs from next year onwards. So that's from 2025 onwards. But in general, most universities, at least for now in 2024, have kept their SAT policy as optional. So just something to keep in mind. You will also need an English proficiency score, or if there are conditions for a waiver set out by the university, and that tends to differ and vary from university to university. You may get to waive that English proficiency score requirement. But generally, since Sri Lanka is not regarded as an English speaking country, an English proficiency score will be required. And lastly, in terms of the students' input, they will also, if they require financial aid, you will also need to submit what is known as the CSS profile, and that is basically the International Student Financial Aid Form. And we will be covering that separately at a later date for another Scholar Saturday session. Then moving on to what is required by the school and others. So your counselor basically, it can be your school's principal, it can be a section head, a grade head, it can even be your class teacher. But generally, the counselor in this sense is your main representative through the school. And they have the responsibility of submitting your school transcripts, that is your term test marks. We usually recommend our scholars submit their term test marks from grade 9 onwards. And then the mid-year grade report and the final year grade report apply to students who are applying while they're still in school. So if you haven't completed your A-levels yet, or if you're in grade 12 or 13, the mid-year grade report basically is what is required to be submitted after you send in your application. So around, I believe, March, your counselor will need to submit another term of grades. And that is basically what the mid-year grade report is. And then you will need to submit your final year grade report when you have completed your education at that school. And this usually happens after admissions. Then your counselor will also need to submit what is known as a school profile. Now, this may not be required per se by all universities, but it is a very helpful document that universities use to contextualize your performance against the rest of your school and the school in general. So the school profile we'll be covering this at another Scholar Saturday session. But the school profile basically is a document that you can prepare, which gives details about what kind of subjects the school offers, the enrollment of the school, the grade profile of the school, any statistics such as that that can be helpful for the admissions officer. But we'll be going into detail about the school profile at a later date. And then lastly, the counselor themselves have to submit a counselor recommendation as well as an evaluation. So this has to be done, by themselves because there is also an evaluative form that the common application itself has. It's not just a letter that they can write and submit. It's kind of a questionnaire that they have to fill alongside a separate, written recommendation. So that's the gist of it in terms of the counselor's responsibilities. And then lastly, in terms of requirements, you generally would need two subject teachers' recommendations. We generally recommend one recommendation from a math or science teacher, and then one recommendation from a humanities or social science teacher. This is not a hard, strict rule. For example, when I was applying, I applied with two science requirements and I was fine. But certain universities, for example, MIT, might require this kind of division. So that's that in terms of requirements. And then just a few more important terms. When it comes to admissions decisions, we obviously know what an acceptance or a rejection is, but a deferral usually happens in the early round. And basically what that means is they have postponed your decision to the regular round or the next round. And what that means is that they cannot make a decision about your application in the early round. So they will be putting your application basically in the regular round pool, and you will then get your ultimate decision in the regular round deadline. So a wait list is not an acceptance. It basically means that they didn't have space for you, but you currently are at the top of their list in terms of people they might be able to admit in case there's some space opens up. Chances of getting in through the waitlist are usually pretty slim. So we don't recommend our scholars, count on that or anything like that. But a waitlist is another decision that you might get. And then lastly, financial aid. The CS, as I explained before, the CSS profile is basically the financial aid form for international students. There are also some alternatives that some universities may offer, namely the ISFA, or some universities have their own financial aid form. So in that case, you might need to do a bit of your own research. But we will be covering financial aid specifically on the 5th of October during the Scholar Saturday session on that date. We actually got a question. Yes, so we actually got a question about whether students need to submit mid-year and final year grade reports in the case that they've already completed their A-levels. Yes, that is correct. You do not have to submit a mid-year or final year grade report if you have already finished school and have already finished all your board exams. So if all your transcripts and A-level results and all of that are, set and ready to be submitted, there is nothing further to be reported to the university. So there is no need for a mid-year or final year grade report. This only applies to students who are still in school while applying. So yeah. All right, getting into the Common App. So basically, as I mentioned before, the Common App is what is used by most US universities, and it opens every year on the 1st of August. And through the Common App, applicants can apply to up to 20 different universities. While the Common App itself is free to use, there is no charge, to register or submit through the Common App. Universities themselves you sometimes have their own fee to submitting an application, and this average is around $45, and but can go up to $100 per submission, which can add up to a lot if you're applying to up to 20 different universities. Thankfully, this fee can be waived quite easily based on our experience, and this can be done through basically a letter that your guidance counselor writes on behalf of you, explaining your financial situation. Of course, we only recommend that you use this option if you genuinely are in a position where you simply cannot afford to apply to that many universities given the average application fee. But yeah, this can be waived through a supporting statement. So, and I'll also show you the section to kind of indicate that in the actual Common App portal. Yeah, so again, most US colleges use the Common App. Some notable exceptions are MIT, or Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They famously have avoided the Common Application, and instead they have their own portal that they use. We will not be doing a walkthrough of the MIT portal, only because it is not open yet. Usually it opens mid-August every year, and we have tried to gain access at least to last year's MIT application, but unfortunately we haven't, but we definitely will be going through the requirements of the MIT application. And then another notable exception is Berea College in Kentucky. They are, famous for being a free tuition university in the US, and they take in about 20 to 30 international students every year, free of charge. And they also have their own separate application. An interesting fact is that it's not only in the US where the Common App is used. Some universities in Canada, Japan, China, and Europe also use the platform. You can see that a lot of campuses or branches of US universities tend to use the Common App as well. If their, parent, if their main campus uses the Common App as well, obviously. And then you'll also see that there are also some American style universities or American universities all around the world. There are a bunch of universities named the American University of Sharjah, the American University of Beirut, the American University of Paris, and they tend to use the Common Application as well. So yeah. All right, so now we're going to be doing the Common Application walkthrough. So just a few things to keep in mind. Once we've logged in, you'll notice 5 different tabs. I won't be going into detail on like each tab because I'll be wanting to focus on the most important few. But basically, you will first see like a dashboard listing all the colleges, the universities that you've selected already. As well as like important info for each university, such as the deadline or the requirements or pending requirements, things like that. Then My Colleges, the second tab, basically contains the supplemental sections for each university. I mentioned the university-specific supplementary essays in the slide previously. That is contained in this tab. Thirdly, the most important tab is the Common App tab, which is the main section, which contains your entire, Common Application that is sent to all your universities, including the Common App essay. Fourthly, the college search. Basically, this is where you go to look up a college, maybe add them, maybe learn a bit about them. It's kind of a pretty nifty like search tab. of all the universities that use the common application. So yeah, that's that. And lastly, you have a financial aid tab, which it's a bit misleading because it's not necessarily used for anything. It's not used to apply for financial aid or anything like that. But it just has some, important information on different types of financial aid and some important links. So you won't find yourself using this tab very often. So yeah, just so those are a few things to just take note. And in the main Common App section, we will be covering, these are the subsections in the Common App section. Profile, family, so that's basically identification information. Then education, testing, basically schooling, education, things like that. Activities, which is your activity section or extracurricular section. Writing, which is basically your essay, as well as your additional information section which we'll be covering. And then lastly, courses and grades. So yeah, I'm just going to head on to the... All right, so we are at commonapp.org, and you can just sign. Firstly, obviously, you need to have created an account. We won't be going through that right now, but once you have created an account, you can just sign in by simply going to this page, and you see a Common App portal pop up right here. So as mentioned, here are the 5 tabs. As you can see, you have the dashboard, which has, the different universities that you've selected. As you can see, it kind of marks your progress in both your common application as well as your university specific application. And I believe once you do choose an admission plan, it also notes your application deadline. Then in my colleges, I'll be going more into detail later on this section, but basically you can access all your supplemental sections through this tab. I'm going to get to the Common App section last because we will be delving into that first. But basically, college search, pretty simple. You can search up any university, and then you can just add it. You can also click on it and learn a bit more about a university. And then you can also add it. So there we go. Financial aid, as I mentioned, is there's not much going on down here, but has some information. Mostly, this information is relevant to students in the US, unfortunately. So again, you won't find yourself here very often. So yeah, quickly going to the main sections. So yeah, gonna go through each section real quick, and feel free to enter any questions you have on the chat box. Just if you have anything you want me to clarify. But basically, firstly, you have to, go through all your personal information. We won't be going deep into that, but something important is that the Common App fee waiver box is in this first profile section. And as you can see, they kind of give you the layout, the different criteria, which qualify you for a fee waiver. And then one of those criteria is the supporting statement from a school official. So that's there. So you just click yes, sign here, and then the actual statement is to be provided directly by the school official, as you might have guessed. Then details about your family. Again, nothing much to explain there. Education covers, if you've gone to multiple universities, you'd have to include, I believe, all of them. yes, you will have to include um, all secondary schools that you have attended. So basically from grade 9 or 10 onwards. If you have taken any coursework at a university, this is a place to include that. All right, I'm just going to spend a bit of time here. So basically, this is the size of your school batch. By class rank, they obviously mean the rank, your rank within the batch, not your class. They use, obviously they use class as batch over there. Um, and if you're not sure of what your rank is within your whole batch or anything like that, um, you can, and if you really can't find out, you don't have to report it. Um, you can also, choose not to report your GPA scale. So they're inclusive of like all kinds of, you know, um, scaling and types of school systems. So yeah, I'm gonna skip through that. So yes, for honors, for all of you Olympiad medalists out there, this um might be I mean, some applicants choose to use the honors section for Olympiad medals and Olympiad recognition in general. Some choose to use the activities section. It's up to you. We would recommend you choose either one of them, not both of them, just so that you're, saving space for something else that you can talk about. But yeah, since Olympiad counts as both like an academic achievement as well as an extracurricular achievement, it kind of counts for both. So you can just take your pick, and we'd be happy to advise you on your specific situation as well. But basically, this is very similar to the activities section where you just name the award or prize that you won, and which grade that you want it in. You'd notice that there is no grade 13 because there is no grade 13 in America. So you can just use, you can kind of like scale it down, use grade 9 as grade 10, and so on and so forth. And then this is pretty self-explanatory, like which level the recognition was in. So that's honors. Then community-based organizations, basically, the Shivers Network is um, an example of a community-based organization. If you are applying through one, be sure to include their details as well. Because in some cases, admissions officers may reach out to those organizations for extra information. So yeah, um, the details that you need to put in. We will be talking more about what exactly you need to put in the Scholar Exclusive section in the latter half. But yeah. And then lastly for this section, future plans. This we want to say that this doesn't really matter as much. Like you don't have to like say you're going to get a PhD, like you don't, even if you don't want to, you can just like, you can choose what you genuinely like authentically, what feels authentic to you in terms of like where you want your career to go. So yeah, you can just, what we would definitely recommend here is just to be authentic to yourself and not try to, portray a certain image or, be someone that you're not. So yeah. And again, like they're definitely not going to hold you to this. They're not going to check on you in 10, 15 years and check if you're an engineer or anything. So don't worry about these kinds of questions. They're, as far as our experience goes, they play a very negligible role in your application decision. What universities really care about are what you have already done and how well you can articulate your story and what is actually in your application. So yeah. Yeah, so this is the section for testing and things like A levels. So if you have taken an SAT, basically you select it, and um, then in this section you report your SAT scores. This self-reporting, this is what is known as self-reporting, basically, just like inputting your SAT score on the common application. This alone is not enough for them to consider your SAT score. So what you will need to do is you will need to send your SAT score, and there are two different options for this. There are the SAT score reports done by, College Board, the people who do conduct the SAT test. They allow, I believe, for 5 free SAT score reports. And beyond that, you will be charged for extra score reports. So if you want to avoid that, what you can do is you can ask your guidance counselor, your school official who is filling out your transcripts and submitting them. You can ask them to include your SAT score report as another document in their packet that they're submitting as the counselor, and that will be fine. That will count as an official score report that they can consider. But yeah, so that is about the SAT. And then there is a question I missed here. Yeah, international applicants. Um, so this is basically yes, because we have our A-level exams, and our A-level exam generally is pretty, you know, decisive in terms of where we head. And so basically this goes as yes. And they also ask you about your um, A-level. They ask you to self-report your A-levels as well. I'm not sure if yeah, I think this counts as yeah, I believe this works because we use the British pattern GCE Advanced Civil Examinations, and you just pick how many subjects you did, note the subject, note the um, score. I believe the letter grade will be enough here. And you can, say actual or predicted. So that's about testing. So the activities section is a pretty important section in the common application as far as your application goes, because this they will be using to gauge your involvement outside your class. And it will be really the only um, high detail like section for them to get an idea of not only what you've been involved in, but to which degree, um, and to which level, and how many hours you put into it. So as you can see, they ask, there's a bunch of different types of activities, and you can see if your specific club or sport can fit into one of these. Usually it can. Then you need to indicate your position or leadership position, then which club or organization it was, and then you get 150 characters to describe this activity. So maximum about 30 words. Um, and we will be talking more about this in this Scholar Exclusive section, where we will delve into how best to maximize your activities section. Um, but yeah, it's not a lot of words that you get, so you need to be careful with your word usage. And then participation grade levels, 19 number 12, and timing of participation, hours spent per week. We recommend you be, truthful with this. Obviously, it's hard to kind of gauge, how much hours you put into a certain, especially when it's something like a club where it's really hard to kind of measure that um in a way that is in a way that makes sense. So just I guess try your best, but don't stretch the truth, because they will be able to tell if you are they will try and like add up the hours and like see if you are like um doing a bit too much. So yeah, and weeks spent per year and intention to participate in that activity in college. So that's pretty much the activities section, and you get 10 slots to fill. So if you have more than 10 activities that you really want to talk about, be mindful about which you choose to talk about, and then the rest you can use the additional information section. And speaking of that section, we have the writing section, and that includes the um, common application, which is the main essay that you um, send out to all universities, and it's 650 words. As you can see, they've included some essay prompts, but our recommendation is usually not to worry too much about like which essay prompt I will be fitting up my essay into. Like we don't find that to be a useful approach when it comes to writing the Common App essay. And we'll talk about that more when we talk about the actual Common App essay, which I believe is next Saturday. But yeah, that's on this section. And then the additional information section is pretty important and pretty underutilized because, yeah, so as you can see, there are two different additional information sections that universities provide. Firstly, since COVID, they have been offering this section to talk about, for you to talk about any disruptions that you had since COVID. This can be, anything ranging from just the inability to, do a lot of clubs because of COVID during the pandemic, or, any disruption you had in terms of your growth as um, in terms of like Olympiad or acting or whatever it is, um, all the way down, all the way down to like pretty serious disruptions that your family went through because of COVID, maybe a loss of income, something like that. So yeah, our recommendation is that anything you feel was important and like significant enough for you that it affected your performance at school, it's good to write about it here so that they get a better understanding. And in general, recommend like our advice is to really use the spaces that you're given as much as possible, because it's not a lot of space that you've been given, right? Um, so that's 250 words. And then you have another 650 words section or any other additional information section. And I was mentioning the activities section where, in the case that you have more than 10 activities, feel free to list out the rest of your activities that you couldn't fit in the activities section, for example, in the additional information section. Or if we don't want you to overuse the additional information section just to talk more about your activities. Be careful about how important it is that you share this information with them. And if it really is important, for example, if you run a startup or if you managed a pretty significant project, and you want to go into further detail about that certain project or startup, you can use this additional information section for that reason. And in fact, I did that as well when I was applying. And more than anything, like any other extenuating circumstances or anything that you or your family or your school went through that affected your performance or profile, things like that. So that I would say is why this space is pretty important. And then yeah, some universities require like you to self-report your courses and grades. For example, Amherst College does. Um, but again, self-reporting grades, just like self-reporting scores, SAT scores, are not going to be enough. You will have to send your transcripts anyway through your guidance counselor. And then gonna quickly go to one of these universities. and go over the supplementals. Okay, I'm just gonna go back here. You can see in the college information. So this again, we have the My Colleges tab, and we have chosen Harvard University's supplemental application. And in the college information section, you can see some pretty useful tidbits. As you can see, they have a hefty $85 fee, and they also list out the writing requirements. Yeah, so basically, I'm not going to go into detail about what Harvard requires because this differs from university to university, but you're usually going to find a couple of essays, short essays for each university, as you can see here. And then your recommenders, you're usually going to find your recommenders over here. I unfortunately cannot show you what it looks like when we've added a recommender, but basically you use this section to kind of input like the details, the full name of the recommender, their email address, and then you add them on as a recommender, and they basically get a notification saying, hey, one of your students, invited you for a recommendation, and they get their own portal to write their recommendation and fill out their evaluation. So if you need to help your recommender through that whole process, make sure to join our Scholar Saturday session where we're going to be talking about the recommendation letter. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the supplemental section. And yeah, I think we can go back to the slides now. So yeah, that was basically what the Common App looks like. And just real quick, some other college applications. As I mentioned, MIT is notorious for not being part of the Common Application. But the good thing is that their requirements are also very similar. They also have a personal information section where they're going to ask you about your identification and family and things like that. Then your academic history, which is going to be similar to the education section that we went through in the Common Application. They're going to ask you for what kind of subjects you did and what kind of grade GPA system they use, your school uses, so on and so forth. Some things to note though, unlike the Common Application, which allows for 10 activities, MIT only allows 4 extracurricular activities. And I guess this kind of is pretty telling of like how they approach applications and how that differs from the way that Common Application believes universities should approach applications. I guess that kind of gives you an idea of how MIT values depth over breadth in a sense, just because I think they really want to see students that spend a lot of time and put a lot of care into one or two activities rather than someone who spread their time thinly over 10, 15 activities, which like, not to say that either approach is different as far as school goes, but yeah, that's just how it is. So 4 extracurricular activities. And then unlike the Common App, so the Common App essay is not going to be part of your MIT application, as you might have guessed, because it's a different portal. So they don't have a Common Application essay. Instead, they don't have like one main essay. Instead, they have 4 100 to 200 word essays. The first one is going to be about like an activity, and they basically say something you do simply for the pleasure of it. Obviously, these prompts are a bit longer than this, but we just broken it, we cut it down into sizable chunks. The second essay is about like your background and where you come from, and essentially like how that upbringing or background has shaped your dreams and aspirations, and like you need to kind of connect those two together. Thirdly, an essay about a community, maybe a community you collaborated with, maybe a community you opposed, maybe a community you've helped, any community that you have engaged with and like that you learned from, essentially, I think is what they want out of this essay. And lastly, they want you to write about a challenge that you overcame. So those are the 4 MIT supplemental essays. And then, similar to the Common App, they ask for a college counselor's recommendation, and they ask for 2 teacher recommendations. And MIT specifically specifies that one of the recommenders should be from a math or science subject, and the other should be from a humanities or social science subject, which is interesting coming from, a college that focuses on engineering and technology. But I guess it again is very telling of like how they view applications and how they value that kind of diversity of thought and uh, agility, variety, I guess, in terms of the subjects that you've taken on during high school. And so, yeah, that's the MIT application. Let us know if you have any other questions. And lastly, Berea College. Now, why we've been mentioning Berea College, because it's pretty unknown, especially in Sri Lanka. But it is pretty special because they are completely tuition free for all, students that they take in, and they are very committed to students from under-resourced backgrounds, and the same applies to their international applicants as well, which is why we really recommend our scholars, throw their hat in the ring and see if, Berea College might be a place for them. And they're a small liberal arts college in Kentucky. They're ranked number 30 in the liberal arts college rankings. And so their application, right? So they have a separate, application form that you have to fill out. Unfortunately, we did not get access to the application just yet. I don't think they've released it yet, but I'm sure that they are going to have questions about your extracurricular involvement through that. But regardless, they have a much longer personal essay that they require from you. They give you between 2 to 5 pages, which is quite a lot. And in it, then they ask you to cover like your life experiences, your plans after Berea, and the kind of community impact that you want to have. And alongside that, again, it's going to be very similar to the Common App here onwards. You need your secondary school report, which is basically your transcripts. You only need one recommendation from a recommendation letter from a subject teacher, unlike most other universities. You need a financial resource recommendation form, which basically is a form that they use to prove that this applicant requires education from a place like Berea College that offers, free tuition. And usually, like international students generally, fall in this category. Usually, our scholars, fall in this category as well. And then they have a test flexible policy. They require 1 test score, but it can be IELTS, it can be TOEFL, Duolingo, SAT, or ACT. So either you do an English proficiency exam, or you do the SAT basically. And since we are recommending our scholars do both an English proficiency exam and the SAT, you're not going to have a problem. And then lastly, they don't use the CSS profile, they use their own financial aid form, and that's called the International Financial Questionnaire. So yeah, that's Berea College. And then before we wrap up this session, just a few general tips when applying, since it's a lot to think about and a lot of different, components and a lot of moving parts. Firstly, start early and plan ahead, and be organized. We'd suggest for you to use any document like a Word document, an Excel document, anything that you're comfortable with, for you to keep track of like different deadlines, different requirements, how many essays do I have to write now, when are those essays due, like what are those essays about, whatever you feel you need to keep track of, definitely do that. And just be proactive and do your own research well ahead of time. And alongside that, just make sure to assist, make sure to notify your recommenders and whoever else is involved in the application process well ahead of time, so that that they won't have to do a rushed job. And also be sure to assist them if they are, and we find that most of us, even when I was applying, I had to really assist my teachers and recommenders through the whole process, because it was kind of foreign to them. And you're probably going to find that it is the same situation for you. So be sure to give them the courtesy of guiding them through the process. Leave plenty of time to write and edit essays, and we find that like based on our experience, like we find that as scholars underestimate this a lot, because it's just something that we are not used to, especially in Sri Lanka, because we haven't been given enough um opportunity in school, unless you take the initiative to write by yourself, and you're a writer at heart, and you're really into creative writing and things like that, and that's a different story. But we haven't been given enough opportunities through school to engage in creative writing, let alone personal non-fiction creative writing, right? So this is something that you're going to have to get used to. And so just as the soonest that you can, just start doing some practicing, and do not procrastinate. Just whatever it is, no matter how bad you think it's going to be, just start writing. The more you write, the more you can read, and the more you can improve. Obviously, it's the feedback loop that we always know about, practice making perfect. Yeah, this, especially when it comes to the US and the kind of factors that play into the applications, you really have to know yourself. You really have to think deeply about who you are as a person, what your interests are, what you want to do in the future, what you want to do with your degree. And we are going to be covering all this in next week's session, where we are covering what an application theme is, and then what the Common App essay should be. So definitely stay tuned for that next week. And so, yeah, that's about, introspection and stuff like that. Make sure to have a support system during this period. It's going to be very stressful, and it's going to be very frustrating, and it's going to be very nerve-wracking, for sure. It's stressful at the start, before deadlines, and then nerve-wracking after deadlines, just waiting for the whole thing. And just kind of build up a healthy mentality around this whole thing, where maybe you can, I don't know, based on my experience at least, something that I can definitely say is that I was saying to myself as I got rejected by school after school, was that no matter what, I got to learn so much about myself through this whole application process. And regardless of where I actually end up, I know that I will enter college with a lot more um and of an idea about myself. And um I think the word that I'm looking for is conviction. Yeah, just a lot more conviction about where I want to head. So have faith that you will go through that kind of growth through the process, and be grateful for it, I guess. And then the last few, make sure to have backup plans, and don't apply to the topmost ranked universities in the US. Don't apply only to the US. Think about other countries as well. Think about other scholarship opportunities. Think about options that you may have back home, maybe state universities. Think about all those different options, and make sure you have them all noted down. Because things might not go your way, and you need to be prepared, both mentally and in terms of your and both mentally and literally, in terms of where you actually are going to head with the options that you have. And then, yeah, just go easy on yourself. And as always, the Strivers Network is an organization that's there to help you whenever you need. So if at any point you feel lost or frustrated, just reach out to us, and we'd be glad to help you. So yeah, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you next week, where we'll be covering application theme and the Common App essay. And we'll see you on the flip side.